Did you know that Verstappen's pole position in Baku wasn't just a perfect lap, but the result of an internal revolution at Red Bull led by Laurent Mekies? What seemed like a simple technical adjustment ended up being the key to regaining confidence and unleashing the RB21's true potential. Before continuing, tell me in the comments, do you think this new Red Bull is already unbeatable in Formula One? The big question is, what did Mekies change within the team to allow Verstappen to achieve a historic qualifying in Azerbaijan? Stay until the end, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. In this video, we'll break down how Laurent Mekies transformed Red Bull and the RB21, turning it into the car capable of giving Max Verstappen a magical pole position in Baku under extreme wind and rain conditions that put everyone to the test. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix has become one of the most demanding and at the same time most unpredictable venues on the entire Formula One calendar. It's not just a street circuit with endless straights and tight corners, it's a track that combines the worst of both worlds, the sheer speed of Monza and the technical complexity of Monaco. Here, teams must strike a balance that borders on the impossible because any mistake in car setup is paid for with tenths of a second that can mean the difference between the glory of a pole position and the disaster of being stuck in traffic. The weather conditions were the perfect storm that revealed who was truly prepared. A crosswind of over 60 kilometers per hour, intermittent drizzle, and multiple red flags that interrupted the session meant the track changed from 1 second to the next. In that context, any car with a narrow operating window was doomed to suffer. Red Bull, on the other hand, found the ideal terrain right there to demonstrate that the adjustments introduced by Mekies were beginning to yield concrete results. Verstappen not only needed a stable car, he also needed the confidence of knowing that every decision the team made would support him when the going got tough. That was the difference in Baku. The Dutchman didn't face the RB21 as an unpredictable enemy, but as an ally with whom he could take extreme risks. That change in mentality, forged over weeks of quiet work, was what allowed him to attack the track with surgical precision in a setting where other drivers were overwhelmed by the pressure. The real turning point for Red Bull in Baku was the technical breakthrough that Laurent Mekies and his team were able to implement on the RB21. It wasn't a spectacular change at first glance. It wasn't a package of large new parts as is often the case at Spa or Silverstone, but rather meticulous adjustments aimed at a clear objective: to expand the car's operating window and make it more predictable in all conditions. This was Mekies' great obsession from the moment he arrived, because he understood that the strength of a winning car lies not only in top speed, but in the consistency that allows the driver to be confident in every corner and under every braking. The most significant adjustment was in the rear aerodynamics. Red Bull worked on the rear wheel inboard wings, small but key components in how airflow is distributed across the rear of the car. With this modification, the team was able to generate more downforce without compromising efficiency on the long straights of the Azerbaijan circuit. This allowed the RB21 to accelerate to its full potential down the more than 2 kilometer straight without losing stability upon reaching the technical section of the castle, where any unbalanced car became an uncontrollable danger for its driver. Another crucial aspect lay in the overall setup. Mekies made the decision to prioritize direct feedback from Verstappen over what the simulator data suggested. The Dutchman had long pointed out that the car wasn't responding as it should in changing conditions, and this time his feelings had more weight than ever in the technical decisions. This openness allowed the engineers to adapt the suspension and weight distribution so that the car offered more stable behavior on uneven surfaces, something that had historically been an Achilles heel for Red Bull on street circuits. Interestingly, these changes weren't an improvised stroke of luck. They came from weeks of controlled experimentation on tracks like Monza and Zandvoort, where the team gathered data that, although costing difficult weekends, served as the basis for arriving in Baku with a revamped RB21. Mekies explained it clearly. Every risk taken was a step closer to the ultimate solution, and that strategy paid off when it was most needed. With this technical breakthrough, Red Bull not only made the car fast in a specific sector, but also made it consistent across all sections of the circuit. This stability was what allowed Verstappen to attack lap after lap, even in light rain and on tires that weren't in the perfect range. The result was a car that, in the Dutchman's hands, seemed tailor-made for a track that typically punishes teams that don't find the perfect balance. Success in Baku wasn't just measured in time and starting positions, it was also reflected in Max Verstappen's language and attitude at the end of qualifying. For much of the season, the Dutchman had expressed frustration with an unpredictable car that forced him to drive at the limits of discomfort. His comments were constant reminders that the RB21 felt like a capricious machine, difficult to tame in changing conditions. However, after pole position in Azerbaijan, the tone was completely different. His satisfaction wasn't that of someone who had managed to survive the session, but rather that of a driver who, for the first time in weeks, felt he had every variable under control. Verstappen described qualifying as a long and chaotic challenge, plagued by red flags, out-of-temperature tires, and constant changes in the road surface. The most revealing aspect was his confession. On the final lap, he didn't have the tires he would have preferred, and yet he decided to risk everything because he trusted the car would perform. That detail is crucial. It means the RB21 was no longer an unpredictable enemy, but a partner he could rely on even when the circumstances weren't ideal. That renewed confidence is what allowed him to attack each corner with surgical precision and without fear of losing control. Verstappen's words made it clear that Mekies' work wasn't limited to the technical side. He also rebuilt his driver's mental confidence. He said he was genuinely happy with the performance and emphasized that, regardless of the weather, Red Bull was there for pole. This level of conviction contrasts with previous races, where uncertainty made him doubt the car's competitiveness even before going out on track. The difference in his speech shows that the change was profound and that the team managed to restore Verstappen's sense of invincibility that characterizes him at his best. What's even more interesting is that this confidence didn't come from a fluke on a single weekend. It was the consequence of weeks of fine-tuning, testing, and risky decisions that Mekies made with an eye to the long term. Verstappen acknowledged that they had already felt a gradual improvement since Monza, and that now in Baku they could confirm that the path was the right one. This line of thinking not only strengthens the driver, it also motivates the entire team to continue trusting the new technical direction. With Verstappen's restored confidence and the solidity of the RB21, what seemed like an insurmountable problem at the start of the season began to transform into a competitive advantage. The Dutchman once again showed himself to be the driver capable of extracting every tenth of a second in extreme conditions, and Red Bull regained the certainty that its star had the car he needed to shine. Now the question is, what role does Laurent Mekies' philosophy play in this rebirth, and how did he manage to establish a culture of controlled risks that changed the mindset of the entire team? The real change at Red Bull can't be understood solely from a technical perspective, but also from the cultural transformation that Laurent Mekies drove in a very short time. For years, the team's structure had relied almost entirely on simulator data, prioritizing mathematical models over the driver's feelings. Mekies decided to break with that tradition. His premise was clear: data is a tool, but the human experience of a champion like Verstappen should be at the center of every strategic decision. This shift in mentality was what allowed the RB21 to stop being an unpredictable car and begin to respond with the stability Max needed to compete again with confidence. Most interestingly, this philosophy wasn't limited to giving the driver more of a voice, but extended to the entire technical group. Helmut Marko openly acknowledged this, noting that discussions were now collective and that the simulator was no longer blindly followed. This meant that Red Bull moved from a rigid, top-down model to a more open ecosystem, where engineers, strategists, and drivers could contribute without fear of contradicting the established order. In a sport where internal pressure often stifles creativity, Mekies managed to free his team to try, make mistakes, and learn at high speed. A concrete example of this new philosophy was seen in tire management. Red Bull adopted a high-risk strategy, keeping an extra set of hard compounds for the race, sacrificing further options during qualifying. This decision, which in another context would have seemed suicidal, reflects Mekies' conviction that his team could maximize the available resources and still find the performance necessary to fight for pole. It was a calculated move, but with a level of confidence that can only be explained in an environment where experimentation is supported by everyone. This culture of controlled risks allowed Verstappen not only to regain confidence, but also to become the greatest beneficiary of a structure designed specifically for him. Every technical adjustment, Every qualifying strategy decision and every setup change responded directly to his feedback. The result was a car that, for the first time in a long time, felt completely aligned with the driving style of its star driver. What Mekies managed to establish at Red Bull goes beyond a pole position in Baku. It's the beginning of a working model where the driver's voice is as valuable as the most advanced simulations, and where risk-taking is no longer taboo but a path to improvement. This paradigm shift not only defines the RB21's present, but also opens a new era in which the team can solidly project its competitive future. Verstappen's pole position in Baku was much more than a number on the timesheet. It represented the validation of a complex process that combined technical decisions, cultural changes, and a commitment to trusting the driver. Red Bull went from being a team navigating amidst doubts to showing a renewed face under the direction of Laurent Mekies. The RB21 ceased to be an unstable car and became a precise tool capable of adapting to the most extreme conditions. This transformation is not the result of chance, but of a clear philosophy that prioritized experimentation and calculated risk. The most striking thing is how this technical revolution translated into a visible change in Verstappen. The Dutchman, who weeks ago seemed frustrated, now regained confidence in his car and the team that supports him. His fastest lap in Baku was not just a show of individual talent, it was the epitome of a project committed to giving its champion back control. The chaotic qualifying, with wind, rain, and tires at their limits, demonstrated that when the car and driver are aligned, the result is practically unstoppable. Now I want to know your opinion. Do you think this new approach from Red Bull will be enough to keep Verstappen in the title fight until the end? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.